one of the things that we really ought to celebrate in this campaign, that very few Americans do celebrate, is people are turning to a far greater variety of news sources for their information. But you argue that's not entirely positive.
Yeah. Well, it's absolutely right, and there's a lot about it that is enormously positive, of course, and it allows us, for one thing, to kind of break the stranglehold of certain kinds of elite liberal assumptions that control the mainstream media. But it does also mean that our country has fewer common mass experiences. We have less of a common culture than we used to. It's really striking how much has changed on that front. You'll know this better than anyone, but in looking at this for the book, the most popular television show in the 1950s was I Love Lucy, and its peak year, it averaged a 70 share rating, meaning 70% of active television sets in the country were tuned to this one show at one time. The most popular show now, putting aside special events, gets something like a 14 share. So our country doesn't have nearly as much of a common popular culture as it used to, and in that sense doesn't have nearly as much in common. One thing that means is that by having a lot more choice, by having a lot more control over what we're exposed to, we do tend to isolate ourselves and lock ourselves up in certain kinds of echo chambers where we only hear things we want to hear. And it does become very difficult to break out of certain kinds of familiar and comfortable assumptions. And that doesn't just mean that we don't hear from people we disagree with. It means we don't even rethink in our own terms, based on our own premises and principles, some of the assumptions that guide us. And so you find the Republican Party, for instance, locked into a kind of 1980s agenda, some of which is very applicable to today, and some of which really isn't very applicable, and failing to confront contemporary problems, in part because the kind of media echo chamber that we all live in just reinforces what we already think, rather than forcing us to confront realities that have to be dealt with.